Thank you, Mark, for being with us here today. Could we start with you introducing yourself to everyone? We could start with right from your childhood days to the time you became one of the most famous proponents of the flat earth theory.
Sure, sure. My life was a little different than most people. I grew up in an island north of Seattle, so it was a very sheltered rural environment. A strong evangelical Christian home. So church wasn't just on Sundays. Went to youth group and vacation Bible school and all the summer programs and stuff like that. And then I went to just a normal university, but since I grew up in a very sheltered environment, I didn't know what universities what that sort of environment entailed. So I drank my first year, so you could just throw away the first year. Then I transferred to a different school and got kind of bored with that, and so I started up an illegal fireworks company on campus and was thrown out at the end of my junior year for manufacturing a whole bunch of fireworks. And then during my probation, because I didn't do prison or anything like that, I played this little video game tournament. It was a computer pinball tournament, and it was worldwide, and I won it, of all things. And the company that was based out of Colorado, they hired me as a ringer, as a professional that would go out and go to them with conferences and make the games look better than they were and talk to industry people. So I do Macworld and E3 and stuff like that. And that was when I was out in Colorado, basically playing video games for a little while for a living, which was super super weird, and knew a lot of the early video game guys. It was fun. And then when that company folded, I stayed in Colorado and taught proprietary software for time and attendance software companies for about 20 years. And that's what I did. I traveled all around the country to places you would never go to on vacation, and these blue collar factories. And I taught these blue collar factory people really complex software. I had a knack for boiling things down. So where I could make complex things as simple as they could possibly be, and that really helped me out later. And then, as I was also getting bored of doing that, I was during that whole process. Remember, I'm older, so I was into the internet when the internet was new, and the conspiracy world really took off when the internet took off. And I looked at just about every conspiracy you could think of, and hated flat Earth. I mean, if you saw the documentary, hated flat Earth, and then finally looked at it and said, you know what? And spent 9 months just hammering on this thing because I hated it so much. And then finally at the end, in February of 2015, said, you know what? I'm going to go the other way on this. I'm going to make a series of videos, put it out on the internet, and see what comes back. Because I do respect the internet as a hive mind, not necessarily individuals, but the hive mind is very, very smart. And they came back at me in mass and said, you know what? It's not that crazy. Here's why. And it just started snowballing from there to here we are, 3 Amazon books, a documentary, TV commercial in Australia. I don't know how many interviews. I think 400 and something. And it was just an amazing ride. And none of it. I looked for none of it. It's completely unsolicited. The phone keeps ringing, and it's like, okay, I just learned to say yes to whatever the opportunity was. So there you go. That's where I am now. Choose later.
Yeah. So, are you telling me that when you first posted all these videos about the flat Earth, you weren't really serious about it? It just took off from there, and then you started really thinking about it and developing,
I
stronger beliefs
well,
around the flat Earth.
I was serious about
Uh,
it, but I still had my doubts because, like with anyone that's looking at it, it's like, well, it can't be real, right? It can't be. But so I held my breath actually for the first 6 months because I was thinking. Here's the thing. I've done enough academics to where, and you probably know this, like when you think you've aced a test, but you're not quite sure, you're ready to hand it in, and you're thinking like, oh, maybe I've screwed one thing up or one or two things up. You weren't sure. I mean, I've turned in blue books before, essay stuff in universities where I was like, I'm 99% sure I got it. And in this case, that was the feeling I had. It's like, man, but that's why I put it out to the internet. That's why I put out my phone number and my email address. I said, look, But all it takes is one person, some guy in the middle of Nebraska in his underwear at 3 a.m. He looks at it, it's like, oh, here's where you went wrong. And then he sends me a thing, and then I shut down the channel. But that never ever happened. So after the first 6 months, no, all the doubts were gone. In fact, there were so many people coming at me with new angles, new proofs. I mean, the first thing that people did was they said, oh yeah, we went to the beach with a long distance camera. We started shooting photography. I going, why would you do that? I didn't say anything about that. It's like, well, because water's perfectly flat. And I go, oh, hey, that's a pretty good idea. It didn't even occur to me. You should shoot across long bodies of water. And that really, really took off. So it was everything that the community brought to me that reinforced it to where now there's only a couple things in the world that could change my mind. And I put challenges out there for years and no one's going to touch them. Anyway.
Thank you for the introduction. So I want to jump right in and ask you that, let's say if you had to convince someone that the Earth was flat, what would be your top five arguments?
Okay, my top five, and this is the same five. It's funny you would ask that because there was a German television team that got a physicist out of Georgetown University, and they said, "Okay, you're going to debate this guy." And they said, "Come up with five things, your top five things." They go, "They got to be science based, though." And I go, "Okay, fine. No religious things, no myths or conspiracies. Five things." And I go, "Okay, fine." Number one, with a bullet, would be long distance photography, without question. Meaning, if the curvature of the Earth is 8 inches per mile, otherwise known as 8 inches per mile squared, eventually things will go off the other side of the curve, right? They'll be on the other side of the hill, boats and lighthouses and anything off in the water because water lays perfectly flat. And that's not true anymore. I mean, beforehand, yes, you could, even 20 years ago, you could take a $3,000 camera, shoulder mounted camera, but the resolution wasn't very good. HD really changed the game to where the boat used to be off in the distance. It would be gone. And all the sailors know, yar, the boat's gone off the horizon, whatever. Now, though, you can take a $400 camera and crank up the zoom. That boat's now back into frame. The boat's back. And you can keep doing this over and over and over again. And the only limit to what you can see appears to be the thickness of the atmosphere itself. Because remember, what we're talking through right now is only about 99.9% transparent. And we're still like in a soup, this gassy, mostly nitrogen, a little bit of oxygen. Number two is my favorite. Number one is for everybody else because everybody else gets that. Number two is the vacuum of space versus gravity. Meaning, you're in a room right now. I don't know if let's say there's a second floor to your room and you make that into a gas vacuum chamber and you put a valve above you and you pop that valve. What happens? It's instant. It's violent. All the air in your room is going to go rushing upstairs because of the pressure. It's thermodynamics. It's, the pressure must equalize. It's a law of physics. And you're saying, what's the point? I go, my point is when you go outside, why is our atmosphere still here instead of rushing off to the vacuum of space? And your first instinct, your knee-jerk reaction will be every single time well, because of gravity. And I go, you mean the same gravity that couldn't hold the air in your room from going upstairs? The exact same gravity? You walk outside that door, that gravity is now holding all the air down on the ground instead of firing off in space, because that vacuum chamber, if you believe what mainstream says, is far, far more powerful than that little chamber above your room. No one likes to touch that one. Third one, which would be the moon shadow from the eclipses. One of my favorites because I got to see it, and they filmed that in the movie, which was super fun. The moon is supposedly 2,000 miles wide, but the blackout zone on the ground is only 70 miles wide. Well, that's weird because that's how big we say the moon is. So if so why does a 2,000 mile wide object, why does the shadow get shrunk down to 70 miles? And you can use all the optics you want, but it never happens in real life. It's like you walking next to a building and your shadow turns into an action figure. It turns into this little tiny thing. It's never ever happened. Shadows are either actual size or larger. They're never ever smaller. Fourth one, the moon temperature, which is always fun because I didn't come up with it. Somebody called in like a year after I got into flat Earth. They said, yeah, man, the moon's cold. And I go, I mean, it's colder at night? Like, no, it's cold. It generates a cold light. I'm going, I have no idea what that means. And they say, okay, so if you're in the sun, I'm not going to convert it. I know you guys are probably Celsius. But if it's 90 degrees in the sun, it's 80 degrees in the shade. We all know this. It's at least a 10-degree swing because whatever it is blocking. Well, on the moon, it's the exact opposite. So if it's, say, 50 degrees in the moonlight, it's 60 degrees or more in the moon's shade. How is that remotely possible? And we only learned recently that we can actually generate this in universities, where you can fine tune a laser, change the frequency, and make it slightly colder. And you're saying, okay, does that prove a flat Earth? No, it doesn't, but it absolutely destroys the relationship between the sun and the moon. Because remember, the only reason the moon supposedly is lit up is because it's reflecting some of the sun's radiation. Well, even in a best case scenario, that means that whatever's on the ground should be neutral. It should never go negative. In fact, you can even do one more test, and I'll take credit for this one, because I said, well, if you take a magnifying glass and you magnify sunlight, you can burn things like paper, right? What happens if you take a magnifying glass to moonlight? It actually gets even colder than normal moonlight. It is so freaking freaky. So what we're saying is basically the sun and the moon are completely self-illuminated, which goes along with our model. One's a big incandescent light bulb, the other's a cool LED laser thingy. Number 5, last but not least, the Van Allen radiation belt question, which is a trap. You can't win it. Which is, are the Van Allen radiation belts announced by Van Allen himself back in the late 50s by he was a NASA employee. Are they deadly? Yes or no? Pretty simple. If you say yes, then how do the Americans get through them exactly? Because remember, the only things that can stop radiation like that are lead, gold, which is twice as dense as lead, and a whole bunch of water, which they use in power plants. Well, the Americans didn't use any of that. They used plastic and aluminum, and not a whole lot of it either. And these guys went six round trips to the moon and back. Nobody died. Nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody even got cancer. 5 of these guys are still limping around today. Whoa, what happened? And so then you say, well, they're not deadly. I go, okay, if that's the case, you can just go to the NASA website, nasa.gov, look up something called Orion Trial by Fire, which is a little video they made at the end of 2014, which says, oh yeah, the Mars capsules, we can't really test with people right now because we haven't solved the Van Allen radiation problem yet. It's like, what are you talking about? You solved it perfectly in the 60s. In fact, it was flawless. What did you forget everything that you built? What happened? No one wants to talk about. So between those 5 questions, I threw at the physicist from Georgetown. That was it. He just folded. He said, yeah, I'm not doing this. And that was it. The interviewers went away, and guys went back to Germany, and that was it. It was a complete bust. But I have used those questions ever since, and nobody writes me to talk about it. Okay, so the short version, where are we? What is the whole flat Earth thing about? Let's start with where you are not. You are not on a tiny little rock flying through space, covered in a little bit of water and a little bit of smoke and impossible velocities in an impossibly huge universe, and your life means nothing because you are, part of the residual effect of a big bang, which no one can really explain. And so instead of this meaningless, tiny, tiny puff of existence, you are living in a building. A structure with walls and a floor and a ceiling similar to a Hollywood studio. And it's so big and so vast that even our best and brightest didn't figure it out till almost 1960, that being the United States and the Soviet Union. And when they did, they realized the public was not ready. And I agree with them on that point, at least not in 1960. We were a pretty twitchy bunch back then, but so they waited and they just decided to keep it a secret. Human beings had nothing to do with the construction of this place. We didn't build it. The line from Contact, we didn't build it. We don't know who did. But whoever it is much older and much more powerful than ourselves. And it's either one of 2 choices. It's either an advanced civilization or some sort of deity. And really, you're kind of splitting hairs at that point because one man's deity is another man's, tech. So yeah, that's where you are. It's a fantastically built structure, and we're inside it. Is it a domed roof? Meh, probably, but I think the edges are squared off because engineering likes right angles. They don't like curved surfaces. Hell, computers don't even know technically how to draw a circle, which is why pixels are square. But yeah, that's where we are, and it's very, very old and very, very well designed, and we didn't figure it out for most of our run here. Our unbroken history goes back, unbroken, maybe 5,000 years. I know your particular country's history goes back longer. I'm actually a big fan of, the Mahabharata. all that stuff. I mean, people discount the Indian lore so much, drives me insane. Which is, it's like, the Vimanas and the flying cities, and it's like, why would anyone discount this? It's like one of the most credible myths, better than the Norse legends. I'll give them that. I'll take a Vimana over Asgard any day. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, point taken, Mark. So can you tell me what do you think does the Earth look like now?
No coincidence that just about every culture you can think of drew the same thing when they drew the world. And some people say, "Oh no, the Greeks figured it out." It's like, look, when the Greeks were doing their thing, nobody even knew what the continents looked like. So it's fine if you want to say it's a sphere, that's fine. But if you don't know where the continents are, then who the hell cares? So that's what we're talking about here: a domed structure which is very, very wide, but the ceiling is very, very shallow. So it's not like it'd be like if you took a snow globe and kind of crushed down the roof to make it maybe a quarter of the height that it is, because you don't need much height for something like this. So if it's, say, 20,000 miles wide, give or take, you don't need a 20,000 mile wide dome or high dome, because our civilization, almost 90% of our population lives between sea level and about 5,000 feet, 1 mile up. And commercial airlines cap out at about 10 miles. Spy planes, if you believe them, cap out at about 20 miles. I mean, technically, the dome wouldn't even need to be 500 miles high. It could be very, very shallow. And the sun and the moon are on the inside, no different than a planetarium. And I don't know if they have planetariums where you are, but that's what we're really talking about. The sun and the moon are just tiny little objects, less than 50 miles wide, but they're very, very close. Could they be inside or outside of the structure? Yeah, maybe. No, you don't know. But everything, the sky, the stars, everything up in the sky is just one giant, elaborate clock that predates language. It's all it does. I mean, it's a clock. It's all we've used it for, and yeah, I know you can build in astrology and stuff like that, but I mean, signs and wonders. But before that, it was like, oh yeah, well, you can plant your crops based on what you see in the sky and how long the sun and the moon and where they are and all the fun stuff. That's all it really is. There you go.
Okay, but what about the edges then? Are you saying there is a point on Earth where I go to uh, and just fall off into space?
Ah, is it like Asgard? Yeah, that Thor did us no favors whatsoever. No, there's no cosmic waterfalls. So when you get to the edges, no matter which way you go, you are going to run into the Antarctic coastline. And the Antarctic coastline, by the way, is not the edge of the world. It is just the beginning of the edge of the world. It goes, most people also don't know that Antarctica is a fascinating place from a geographic standpoint, meaning most of the continents, even mainstream says it sits around, what is it, 14,000 feet, plateaus at about 14,000 feet. That's incredibly high. I mean, altitude sickness kicks in at about half that, 7,000 feet. So how far you have to go from the Antarctic coastline to the border of this building, we don't know. Thousands of miles, maybe. They tried to find it. I think it took them the better part of 30 years to find the edge. I mean, they were just flying, the Americans and the Soviets especially, were just flying around in big arcing circles for years, from 1927 all the way up until 1955, 1956, looking for something. And I had no doubt what they were looking for. They were looking for the outer marker. And so, no one's falling off into space. In fact, the big question follow-up was like, what made you think there was still space? Because if you're living in a building, again, we're taught this so many times. It's repeated to us so many times over our years and reinforced through television and books and movies that there's this space. And it's like, why would there have to be space? I go, if there's an illusion of space, then why would there have to be real space? Meaning, if you're in a planetarium and you see space up on the ceiling, it's like, well, there's Jupiter. Yeah, can you get to it? Well, no, why not? Well, because it's just an image on the ceiling. I go, yeah. So who's to say when you don't walk out of that planetarium, you're just not in a much, much bigger planetarium? And then what's outside of it? I don't know, but it's not space. Space was one of those things that never ever made sense, even to the highbrow intellectuals. Carl Sagan, a great example, where he was one of the first guys to say, space seems like an awful waste because there's these huge, 99.999% of it is just nothing. So he goes, I don't get that. But anyway, that's why he was always fond of pumping out these huge numbers, which again didn't make any sense. There you go. Sorry,
Mm.
I ramble.
Then why hasn't anybody been there till now?
Well, every once in a while, someone says they have, or at least has tried. But what, again, the general public doesn't realize is the Antarctic Treaty, which was put in place in the late 1950s, is bulletproof. You can find online, there's PDFs of it all over the place, where the Antarctic Treaty says that no company from any country, no matter how much money you have, can set up shop there ever for the end of time, till the end of time. It's like it's the only unbroken treaty in the history of treaties. Treaties are, it's the running joke. Treaties are meant to be broken. This one is not. In fact, it's not even up for review until 2041. The only people that are down there are the military and military scientists. Just to get permission to go on to the ice, you have to apply with these massive fees to multiple countries. It's also the only piece of real estate in the world that's not owned by anyone. Just again blows my mind. It's like everything is owned by somebody. There isn't a square inch except for Antarctica. Antarctica is like, oh, yeah, no, nobody gets to own that. It's like, why? It's made out of money. When the Americans came back in 1954 in that wonderful broadcast, and Admiral Byrd came on television, he goes, yeah, the place is made out of money. There's mountain range made out of coal, there's oil, there's gas, there's minerals, there's uranium, which was a big deal back then, still is. And he said, oh, yeah, we're probably going to have conflicts down there because people are going to be fighting over the resources. And the next thing you know, the Antarctic Treaty has put it in place and everybody ratifies it. Nobody disputes it. Here's the thing that bugs me about the Antarctic Treaty. It's, again, especially with the oil and gas industry. You probably don't know that where you guys are, but the oil and gas industry is so powerful here that they could start fracking in my backyard tomorrow if they wanted to. It would not take a lot, much to do. If there's oil there, they will find it. And yet these companies aren't even allowed to talk about Antarctica. It's not even a subject they're allowed to bring up. I'm sorry. That was a huge red flag for me. I mean, this world is still based, no matter what form of government you have, it's still based on greed and power and money. And yet, Antarctica, which apparently is just chock full of all those things, they were told, oh, yeah, by the way, we're just going to lock this thing down. We're going to put a big padlock on the door and be like, yeah, nobody can go there. It's like, nobody's allowed to contest it. No, again, if I was like the head of British Petroleum, I'd be running full page ads in the London Times year after year saying how great it would be for us to go to Antarctica. Never, ever happens. Never, ever happens. Sorry. It's just, yeah. Antarctica is one of the coolest places ever, and nobody goes. Yeah, by the way, it's not that you can't go there. If you want to pay, and I'm not going to convert your currency, but it'd be about $15,000 American, or roughly that, maybe 13,000 euros to go there. And you go there and you get your picture taken on the coastline with some penguins, and you might go out to this little marker. They say, well, this is the magnetic South Pole, even though compasses do not work in Antarctica. And that's it. That's as far as you can go. You can't just run. You can't get a helicopter and just take off and go there. The Antarctic Treaty completely forbids it. In fact, what's interesting was when we started doing our thing and talking about Antarctica, within a year, all of a sudden they banned drones entirely. Drones aren't even allowed on Antarctica anymore. It's like, what? Even the little ones. Yeah, a bunch of crap. Sorry. There you go.
Okay, so my question is, what about the ages of evidence that people have gathered, uh, about the round Earth? Like we have satellite images all across the internet. So then, where does this flat Earth root from? Is this a mistrust against the scientific establishment, or is it something religious, or people, or do people just, fancy a cult?
All of the above. So yeah. Oh, let's address the easy one, which is there a religious aspect to this? Yeah. At least 50% of the people in our membership in the Christian-based countries are on board with this. Mostly because they went straight to the Bible and went through it with a fine-tooth comb and said that, yeah, it's absolutely a flat earth book. In fact, there's only one verse in the entire King James Bible that even hints at it's a globe, which is Isaiah 40:22, which says, he who sitteth upon the circle of the earth. Well, in the ancient Hebrew, circle is not globe or sphere or ball. It's just circle. Your dinner plate is circular. Your dining room table, unless it's a square, is probably circular. Um, but when it comes to the evidence, what people mostly lean on is NASA. That's what they mostly lean. When they go against flat Earth, they say, "Well, it's obvious we have the picture." From NASA. It's like they'd never lie to us. Like, oh, the government would never lie to you, and science would never lie to you. I'm not saying that science isn't a bad thing. I like science. We're talking on the fruits of science right now. The technology that we have built. But science is made up of men, and men are corruptible, like in any profession. I don't care what it is. Look, there are conspiracies in business, in politics, in sports, and entertainment, and yes, even journalism and science. It's just can science be trusted? Sure. Does science sometimes take the money and bend the rules a little? Yeah, they do. I mean, especially with products. Up here in the United States, for example, science has taken the money, especially when you have quarterly profits that need to be met. I mean, look at the things going back in the day. Lead paint. That was a terrible, mismanagement of funds there. Lead gasoline, DDT, which was used to kill mosquitoes, all the variations of DDT. Oh, I don't know, asbestos. Great product, by the way. Asbestos is a fantastic product, unless you work in the factories, and then it's not so great. And I don't know how many scientists took the money and told everybody in the United States that smoking was totally fine, absolutely fine for you. In fact, most people don't know that the only reason we even had the lawsuits, the big why we don't advertise cigarettes on TV and radio anymore, is because it wasn't because of the cancer rates. It was because the health insurance companies didn't want to pay for all the medical treatment. So it was health. It was the massive health insurance company. That's all you need, which is why Bill Nye, you know who that guy is? Bill Nye? You ever heard that name? Guy here in the States, nope. He was an actor. He got his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, gave it up immediately for acting, was a comedian troupe up on the West Coast. And Disney, he did a little show called Bill Nye the Science Guy. And Disney picked it up, syndicated it. And so the reruns were out there, and because people grew up watching that show, they immediately thought, oh, well, he's an accredited scientist. He's on the news constantly talking about the Mars rover and genetic manipulations and quantum physics. And it's like, dude, you don't even have your master's degree. What the hell are you doing up there? It's because, as producers have told me, it's like he looks the part. He looks like a geeky science guy. That's his only credentials. And he's like the fourth most popular media scientist in the world. Sorry, I get worked up.
Do you remember any particular instance when this mistrust against the system started?
Yeah. It was sometime before Flat Earth when the moon missions were being questioned. The Apollo missions. The Americans, a lot of people outside of America don't realize how suspicious it was even for us. You got to remember, we're go team, wave the flag, rah rah, America's the greatest, right? We put men on the moon. And we were all into that in the 60s, but quickly, once the 70s started rolling around, we started, there were very smart people. It's usually not academics necessarily, but they're nerds, big nerds, science nerds that would start looking at the data. It's not that they were questioning science, they were questioning NASA, but NASA is the face of science here. I mean, they're the cutting edge of science, and they're like, there's something doesn't look right. And it's like, wait, how did you do this fuel system? Hey, how does this oxygen system work? And they had all these questions because they couldn't figure it out. It's like, how are you guys doing all this stuff when the tech doesn't warrant it at all? I mean, it was really, really bad. So that's when I started early on wondering about that. But again, I wasn't attacking science itself. I was attacking the people that were the face of science. Again, scientific method, hey, test, observe, repeat. Totally get that. Lots of people do it for all sorts of things. I love science as a body, but when you realize that the public will believe you, if all you have to do is have the science degree, people take advantage of that. There's a great quote, let me read it real quick, from George Orwell. And he wrote this in, I think, 1946. He wasn't a flat earther, but it was interesting to him. He goes, you ask anybody on the street, he goes, how do you know the world's a globe? And their first answer is always the same. It's like, what are you talking about? We know. It's known. It's a done deal. It's a globe. It's like, really? How do you know? And then all of a sudden people start getting agitated because it's all of a sudden they realize that it's like, it's not that you haven't been up there. You were told. You were told. And I know, and again, you're saying, well, we have pictures and stuff. Not in 1946, they didn't. How did everybody in the world know in 1946, 12 years before NASA was even founded? How did everybody know in 1946 that it was a globe? We didn't have high altitude anything back then. It's because they were told this. And he was talking about the responsibility of science. He's going, look, if you're science back then, even now, he goes, people will believe what you say. So you better be careful about what you're throwing out there. So, anyways, long answer short, the moon missions were the first thing for me. When I wasn't questioning the science, I was questioning the people representing it.
So, who do you think is profiting from this whole cover up?
It's a big question, which is the people that are profiting are the power brokers. So let's say out of all the groups, let's just pick a generic one. Let's just say the Illuminati, right? You've heard that one a few times. Let's say the Illuminati gets their military intelligence back in 1960, and they say, okay, it's not what they want to gain. It's what they have to lose. It's like, oh yeah, could they profit from this? Sure, but money isn't their biggest thing. Their biggest thing is keeping society controlled to their certain degree. If all of a sudden you're in an Illuminati meeting in 1960 and you're saying, well, maybe we should tell the public what's the worst that could happen, right? And then somebody at the end of the table goes, I'll tell you what the worst that could happen is. It's number one, academics. Every university in every country, you would have to empty libraries out because, I don't know, astronomy and astrophysics, that's gone probably forever. The remaining physical sciences, geology, hydrology, biology, archaeology, those have to be just rebuilt from the ground up. You would have to clear out entire sections of libraries. And that's every university in every country. That's an academic nightmare. Economically, you'd have to shut down world markets for months just because you don't know what it means. I mean, the repercussions. I mean, cities would move, industries would change. The stock market would be this roller coaster of epic proportions. Nobody wants to deal with that. But the last, not least, the biggest one would be the spiritual sense, meaning the five major religious houses of the world, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity. You're giving them leverage against the scientific foundation simultaneously. You're giving these massive groups, which control, 80% of the population, and telling them, oh yeah, by the way, don't be too hard on science. Even though science has been beating you over the head with textbooks for 5 centuries, don't beat them up too bad. And they would absolutely unleash on science. It would be, okay, so you're really wrong about something important. What else are you wrong about? Oh, I don't know. How about evolution? How about carbon dating? How about the Big Bang? How about dark matter? And it would never end. Science would never recover fully from that. So yeah, again, it's not what they stand to gain, it's what they stand to lose. If there's even a 5% chance that the people would start running through the streets with pitchforks and torches, you don't do it. Now that was back in 1960, and I completely agree with them, by the way. 1960, we weren't ready to hear this sort of stuff. But now, 2020, 2021, you can push the same narrative everywhere simultaneously. I mean, we've got high-speed internet, social media, 6 billion smartphones. More people have smartphones than have running water. So whatever you want to put out there, people will go along with. It's, science and the smartphone thing have kind of integrated. Whatever's pushed out, whatever narrative on the phone is out there, people will go along with. So I think you could do it now. You could do anything you want.
So, what I gather from what you're saying is that there are these power brokers who have set up this narrative to make you believe what they want you to believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's worked so far. If the illusion has worked and it's kept people complacent mostly, which is, look, you're in space, you're not getting off the world, there is no edge. That's the big one, which is you got to keep people away from the edge. My example would be, I don't know if you guys have wildlife preserves in your country, but we do here, where you could put some buffalo, what's another animal? Some cows. Put some cows in a wildlife preserve and 1,000 acres, give or take, right? and put a fence around it, water and grass and all this stuff, they'd be so happy. You could put any life form out there, they couldn't be happier. You put some humans in that wildlife preserve, oh, that's a different story. All they are going to care about is the fence. That's all they're going to care about. It's like, where'd this fence come from? Who made the fence? Why are we on this side? Who's on the other side? Have we angered the fence people? We should sacrifice people to the fence. And it just goes on from there. It turns into this nightmare. Remember, that's just one thing. So what's the answer to that? You hide the fence. You make it invisible. You tell people there is no fence. You make sure they never get to the fence. And say it's a globe. You can run around all day long. And that works. Plus, also Antarctica, I think as a design standpoint, it just screams go away. There's no indigenous plant life. There's no animal life. Whatever supplies you take with you, that's all you got. There's nothing, which again, it screams go away. So yeah.
You call yourself a freshman recruiter for flat earthers. How do you recruit these people? Like, what's the process here?
Normally, I mean, I just go out there and talk about it. I mean, anyone wants to talk about it, I'll talk about it. I really don't care which group it is, as long as it's not trolls. Every once in a while I'll get people that will just like, all they're doing is getting set up. You're getting set up to get laughed at, which is fine. But there's no prerequisite. Only that if what I try to tell people, one of the frustrating things about flat Earth is I'm not there to convince people. I'm not there to persuade people. I'm just there to put the seed in somebody's head. In fact, whoever's interviewing me, especially if they have a large audience, I'm not even trying to convince them. All I want is the audience to listen, because the host rarely, if ever, changes their opinion about it. I mean, I lost count how many hosts that I've talked to that said, just so everyone knows, I am not a flat earther. I don't think Mark's going to convince me. Blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, I get it, because they can't. Because the backlash is too, it's ever the big, in fact, the bigger the interview, the bigger potential backlash. I mean, we've had major networks pull interviews. Heck, Alex Jones, one of the big conspiracy guys out there, his show wouldn't touch us for 4 years. And because it was such a great question, he goes, well, it wasn't him, it was his producers that said, how long can we talk about flat Earth without actually saying flat Earth? Because even saying the words just triggers people. And that should say something. I go, which is why, again, we have a lot of people that will want to talk about it. Anyway, so there are no prerequisite questions. I mean, you're one of the few people that actually, sent the questions ahead of time, which is wonderful. But I don't even ask. It's like, look, you can ask whatever the hell you want, because it's just one of those topics that it reacts differently with different people. And part of it's tied to your schooling. So if you have a master's degree or higher, you're probably there's not much I can do for you. You are locked in, over here, which means you're already in your 8th year of university schooling, if you finish your master's degree. And but everybody else, the general population is not in that category, which works out fine. Again, I'm not mad at the people, the physics people or the general science people, but we're after a different audience. We're after an audience that is, as open-minded as possible.
So any specific questions you ask them, like, how do you spot the difference between, let's say, a troll and a genuine guy? Or
there's a couple. So there's a couple giveaways. If I can sniff out people that I can guarantee are already, the biggest one is they will use the word round. They will say, I believe, they say, I believe in a round Earth, I absolutely know they believe in a round Earth, because we only use ball or sphere or globe. And so if any interviewer comes at me and says, and they start using the word round multiple times in certain paragraphs, I already know where their head's at. There's nothing I can do. They're already in that mindset. But I don't generally ask them. I don't set it up. Here's why. Most of the time when I get called, especially from bigger groups, it's the producers that are calling me. The bigger the interview is, the person that you're talking to has less to do with it than anything. They're just mouthpieces. There's, a famous movie here. We did a couple of them called Ron Burgundy, which was about a news anchor in the 70s. And basically the running joke was whatever's on the teleprompter or in their earpiece, they'll do. they'll say no matter what it is. And it's like, in fact, I did a thing for National Geographic a few years ago. I'm talking to this pretty girl across from me, right? She's like a hard-edged journalist, but all she's doing is repeating the questions the producer's asking behind my head. He's going, all right, now you're going to ask blah, 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 blah. And she asked blah, blah, blah. I'm going, and it just occurred to me, it's like, wait, I'm not talking to these people at all. I'm talking to the producers. The producers are the ones with all the power when you get to certain levels. So no, there's no prerequisite questions because I'm at their mercy. You know, the people that I'm talking to, whether radio or television or whatever, it's always the producers. And by the way, real quick, there was a British production show where I was actually talking to an astronaut, and I think it was Piers Morgan, British journalist, and I knew it, and people say, why aren't you attacking? You know, because I'm going through Skype, and I go, because there's multiple producers in a studio that I'm listening to, that they've got their finger on the kill switch. And if I say anything, you know, if I get out of line, you know, they'll hit that switch and I'm gone, and they'll say, oh, lost Mark for some reason. Don't know why. We'll try to get him back after the commercial. Not so much for me because peer pressure didn't do much for me. I'm a big fan of anyone looking into stuff like that. Look into the ASH experiment, ASCH, which is basically straight up peer pressure. Which is the ASH experiment says that if you have one person in a group of people, they're going to generally go along with the group. It's so weird, but it's part of being human, which is everyone wants to be special, but everyone wants to fit in. That's a very, very difficult balance. As far as the flat earthers, why, you know, like for example, once you get into flat earth, we have a 99% retention rate, which is amazing. You know, meaning once you're in because and that's a very matrix. We use the matrix a lot in different memes, but it's very matrixy. You know, if you remember that movie, once you're out, you're out. And it's like, and the thing's like, even if you could get put back in, would you want to go back? The great thing about flat earth, which is why people, when they get in, you know, they don't really care about it. I mean, yes, we've had relationships fall apart. People have gotten divorces and families have been alienated from it. But it's because when they get out, we didn't force them to get out, which is different from a cult. If, you know, let's say it was you, right, for example, I'm not going to convince you that it's flat. You're going to convince yourself. Eventually, you're going to break that globe down yourself, off air, whatever. And that's what happens with so many people. They're going to stay up late. They're going to watch stuff. They're going to read stuff, and they're going to break up the globe themselves. Well, if that happens, how do you put back together something that you were the one that shattered it in the first place? It's different when it was me that was doing it. It's like, well, Mark was full of crap, so I could put that back together. But if you did it yourself, that's tough to do. So so the peer pressure doesn't really affect the flat earth community that much, only because once you, again, the matrix thing, like, well, sorry, I know you don't have too much time, but
no, please go ahead. Please go ahead. Unless you don't have time. I mean, I
got time. The matrix is like that though, which is fine. You know, you broke out of the matrix. How are you going to force that guy back in? Right? You're not. I mean, yeah, I know. And for the movie's sake, they wrote in Cypher. It's like, oh, I'm going to go back in, have my memory erased. It's like, it's not what I would do, but whatever. Anyway, so hopefully that helps.
I just wanted to know, like, you know, what would be like let's say, ballpark figure of the year-on-year sort of growth in followers, uh, you know, for the flat Earth community.
When we first got into YouTube, which is really the vehicle that we used for as long as we did, if you typed in flat Earth back in 2015, the search results came in at about, relevant search results came in at about 50,000. And that means all videos, all references to it, everything that was linked to it in some capacity. And that number started going up and up and up and up and up. And to where in fact, they even tried to stunt the search results back in 2016 and 2017 when we were like at 12 million, 13 million relevant search results. I mean, it was going up, but it was incredible numbers. And then in the summer of 2018, I remember very vividly because I still have videos out there in my timeline. In fact, there's a timeline playlist. Please feel free to look at it before my channel finally gets taken down, which is in the summer of 2018, I said that, well, it's going to probably give me another 6 months before we catch Donald Trump. I was trying to track, and no, we were tracking even faster than that, where we caught him in the summer of 2018, where he had 20.8 million and we had 20.9 million relevant search results. And I remember I made a video. They weren't very happy about this. I made a video that said, Flat Earth has caught the president of the United States. And shortly after that, I had a friend wake me up one morning and said, yeah, by the way, the scoreboard's gone. And I go, what do you mean gone? I go, the numbers are down. I go, what the hell? And they go, no, search results has been removed from YouTube permanently. And I go, what are you talking about? That's Internet 101. I go, everyone's got search results. That's the whole point. It's like, oh, search results. Yeah, I go, it'll pull up topics, but the number's gone. Search results equals a number. That line has now been removed from YouTube. It's like, what? And people say, oh, it's not because of Flat Earth. That's delusional. It's your ego. I go, it absolutely is not. Because we were tracking, we were the only ones that cared about the scoreboard. We were just showing people all the time. We were making videos like we're crushing it out there. The only people that were ahead of us were, people like, I don't know, Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift. And Lady Gaga was only at like 12, 13. We just blew her by. All the science references we blew by NASA, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he wasn't even at 1 million. We were crushing all of it. And it was all removed by the summer of 2018 to where now we don't even know how really to track our metrics because we're out there a lot. I mean, I know this, all our conventions, we were doing so much stuff in 2019. I did conferences in 7 countries. So many cool things. I mean, did the commercial in Australia. In fact, everything fell apart. I was on my way. I got my passports ready. I was about ready to go back to the UK to do a McDonald's commercial for Pancake Day because, pancakes are round and they're flat. And that's when the whole virus thing happened. It's like, it's killing me. So no, I don't know how many millions of people are out there, but it's a lot. Oh, so many. But again, 90% of them are in the closet because they don't want to come out to friends and family and coworkers because they're worried. If you remember the basketball player, the main Kyrie Irving out here, when he came out, it scared the hell out of a lot of celebrities and I talked to them. I talked to celebrities, different ones, which I can't name. And I go, well, you're going to come out? They go, did you see what happened to Kyrie? I go, the media won't stop talking to him about it. And in fact, the only reason Kyrie came out is because he figured he had nothing to lose. He's like 25 and he had his championship ring. LeBron was his best friend and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, what are you going to do to me? It's like, yeah, well, what happens when that championship fades away? What happens then? It's just you and the media, and they weren't going to stop. So, yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of us, so many people. And the best part about us is you don't know who they are. Because it's not like we're wearing special patches or bumper stickers or anything like that. They just show up at things. That's weird.
Do you guys keep a database or something like that?
God,
number of members?
No. In fact, we wouldn't. It's an interesting idea, but it would never ever fly with our group because so many of our members want to remain anonymous. I've got family members. I've got cousins that say, yeah, absolutely love your work, support everything you do. No, we're not coming out ever. It's like, why? It's like, well, most of it's because of work. Family, you can deal with family, but eventually, if you have to go into work every day, you won't be that guy. You want to be the flat Earth guy at work? Yeah, it's never going to go away. Once that sticker is on you, it's not coming off. It's not like you're gonna, again, because we have a 99% retention rate. It's not like you're gonna recant. So yeah. It would be nice to have a register. By the way, the Flat Earth Society, that database has nothing to do with us. That was the old, the one with Thomas Dolby. The singer is the first one. No, that was the group out of Hong Kong. That was Flat Earth 1.0. Once social media took off, that's when we came in. In fact, the original Flat Earth Society didn't even contact me for almost 2 years, and I got a hold of me and said, oh, yeah, I like what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And I said, where have you guys been? I go, we've been ripping up the internet, and we haven't even heard from you. And, in fact, after that was the last time they ever called me. And they never showed up at the conferences or anything like that. So, and also the Netflix documentary really, really helped, which was even weirder. We shot that thing, and the producers hated us. Producers were not Flat Earthers. They didn't want anything to do with Flat Earth. They never made a sequel. They're going, oh, it's never going to sell. Sold to everybody, and then Netflix picked it up and went from there.
So I had a chat with someone last night, and they told me, I told them about this interview, and they asked me, why can't flat earthers just join the other side? So my question to you is, what makes this an important issue for you?
Flat Earth's important because for the first time, it reinforces that you are not alone. You are not an accident. You have purpose here. Now, can I tell you exactly what that purpose is? No. But I can tell you that once you change the universe from this massive thing into a structure that's very, very manageable, two things happen. One, it becomes way easier to get your head around it. But the other thing is that you, and again, this speaks to a lot of the religious people, is that if it was built, if it's a structure, if you're living basically in a cake box, then somebody had to build that cake box. And some people, and even if you don't believe in God, whichever God that may be, you have to admit that whoever built this is at least one level closer to knowing God's phone number than you. And that is a powerful, powerful thing for a lot of people. It's a message of hope more than anything. People do not feel as alone. I don't mean necessarily the community. I mean, yeah, it's nice that the community people can, but even when you're by yourself, it's like, oh, right. So we're not going to get killed by this or that, and you realize how absurd everything else really is. So that's why people fight for it. It's a positive. It's, by the way, it's why we have probably a high 30s, low 40s female membership, which is amazing. Most conspiracies are high 80s, low 90s% male membership because it's dark and sinister and everyone talks like Batman. And it's this dark black hat. Everyone's twirling handlebar mustaches. It's the Illuminati. It's the Bilderbergs. It's all, we should overthrow it all. It's like, no. With Flat Earth is the only happy, positive thing. And I run into so many women at conferences that I'm going, it's like, why are you here? It's like, oh, because it's really cool and it's got this positive energy to it. It's like, yeah, it does. I mean, like, for example, the Netflix documentary was what, even though they were trying to paint us as kind of kooky and crazy, it still wasn't negative. You didn't see a lot of people in there saying, "Oh yeah, we should burn the government down." No, it wasn't that at all. It was really awesome. So yeah, that's the reason why we fight for it. Message of hope.
Okay. Three more questions. Okay. Very quickly.
All right.
What is your take on the current space travels by Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson?
Boo! Okay, here's why. In fact, everything after, you got to remember that a few years ago there was that Tesla Roadster in space thing, right? You remember where the convertible was supposedly sent up in space? I remember waking up. Somebody sent me, a shot of this. It was just a still shot, and I go, who made that? Was that Jaron? Was that Bob? Which one of our guys made this shot? Right? They go, no, man, that's a live stream. I go, what? And so we started watching it, and we shredded this thing, right? I mean, this car, nothing made sense about this thing at all. Remember, it was supposedly just taken out of his garage. It wasn't retrofitted for space. I go, okay, if this thing was real, how many things went wrong with it? I don't know. Forget about the paint blistering or the dash warping, because there's massive temperature swings from cold to hot. The side windows should have spider web. The front windows should have been destroyed. Every pressurized system in that car should have been just the tires should have turned into bombs. We're talking about the vacuum of space, right? The car should have been a complete disaster, and none of that happened. It was absolutely pristine. 3 beautiful HD cameras around it. And the thing that bothered me the most about that damn car was how careful they were to not put any branding on it. Remember, it's two companies, one private, one public, SpaceX and Tesla, right? There wasn't a logo anywhere to be found on that car. It's like, wow, how is that even possible? I go, this is advertising world. I go, and Elon is a very entrepreneur. He's all about the money. I go, in fact, why was he using a convertible? I go, the flagship car is the S series, the 4-seater, the sedan. I go, why wouldn't he put the flagship into space? Why would he put that stupid convertible? I go, in fact, all you had to do, you could sell the seats for those cars and put icons. If you could put Disney alone, you could put Iron Man, a Stormtrooper, Groot, and maybe Boba Fett. In those 4 seats, the thing would have paid for itself. In fact, why didn't any other car companies follow that suit with it? It was none of it made sense. And then it was like, it's like, oh, we're orbiting the Earth. It's like, we're going to remember, supposedly that thing was going to slingshot off to Mars, right? Even though we don't know what propulsion system was used. And then they said, oh, we're going to slingshot off to Mars and cut transmission. It's like, why'd you cut transmission? I go, what, the better shot would it be to show the Earth as it fades away in the distance? By the way, the last point on this, which is, that's one thing that's always been missing from every space mission. There has never been a single space mission ever to where the Earth formed into a ball as whatever craft was leaving. It's never happened in the history of space travel. Statistically, absolutely impossible. Anyways, you're asking about Branson and Bezos and those guys. No, after the Tesla Roadster thing, we couldn't take anything seriously after that. It's like, what the hell? It's like, oh, fine. So Bezos supposedly went straight down, and Virgin Galactic modified a Learjet and took it up to whatever mileage. It's like, no. It's a distraction piece. Every space piece you've ever seen is distraction, and it's always the same subtext. Forget about those guys. Think about the other stuff. It's like, oh, the rings of Saturn. There's a funny spot on Jupiter. We're reclassifying Pluto. Blah, 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 blah. They don't even care if you read the articles. All it is like, oh, yeah, Pluto, because you're on a globe. Jupiter, you're on a globe. Saturn, on a globe. Some black hole, on a globe. Gravity waves, because you're on a globe. That's all they care about, is that reinforcement. So no, Bezos and Branson, it's just part of a clown show. In fact, it's pointless. Why the hell would you? The part that got me is, sorry, one last thing on this, which is they didn't go anywhere. It's like, look, if you're going to make some super, super cool rocket plane, go from Europe to the United States in an hour, right? Go to freaking China. It's like, if you're coming up and coming straight down and the news media runs these stories saying it's going to be a new age in consumer space travel, it's like, where are you justifying that story headline? No one went anywhere. No one's going anywhere. Every year I see the same story about, we're developing a new supersonic jet that's going to take you from China to the U.S. in 2 hours. No, you're not. I've been seeing that story since the 80s. Not there. So, no. Is that opinion, how's that work for you? And if Elon comes out and does, by the way, one more thing. Why haven't any of these guys gone to the freaking space station? That character in the movie Contact, Hammond, the really, really rich guy that was like living on the space station. He's got the money. Why didn't Branson go to the space station? Why not go there? What the hell? Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I know you got a couple more questions. Go.
What if, let's say, in the year 2050, if space tourism really picks up and you are given a chance to go to space, and what if you end up seeing around Earth? What then?
I'd quit. I'd quit tomorrow. And that's not even a question. I know the documentary guy's like, oh, you'll never quit. Of course I would. The whole point of this was to quit. When I put the clues out there, I was like, look, I don't want to believe in flat Earth, but I think it's flat. Shoot me down. Anyone that's, in fact, some group out of London wanted to buy me a ticket for the one of the Virgin Galactic things, which is pointless anyway. It's like, look, even if it goes up 50 miles, it's not space, right? It's just a really high plane. It's 300,000 feet. I go, but as far as the space tourism questions, okay. So first off, every president since Reagan over here, right? And that goes back a ways. Reagan and the Bushes and Clintons, every single one of them says, we're committed to going back to the moon. I know I was kind of doing an Obama impersonation, but we're committed to going back to the moon, right? That's what they keep saying. Every president has said, we're going back. The bigger question is, why didn't we go back to the moon? As a matter of fact, why hasn't any country put men on the moon since 1972, since it was the Americans. So when people talk about, oh, space tourism and space this, it's like, yeah, they were hyping that back up in the 60s. Pan America, before they went bust, I mean, that's part of the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, was they had this orbiting space station that was, hovering above the Earth, and that was going to be part of the space tourism. And you could go up there and do things, and there was a base on the moon. The science fiction movie Space, or television series Space 1999, right, which was set in 1999, was filmed in the 70s, and it was absolutely real. That people, it was like, yeah, by 1999, I can totally see we can have a moon base. In fact, why did the space race stop? Forget about space tourism. Why did the space race stop? Remember, it was the United States, Soviet Union, big space race. You can look up some wonderful covers of Time magazine. It's like, oh yeah, we did this and they did this, and all of a sudden the Americans get there and everybody else quits. The Russians just quit after all that. They just shut it down. It's like, no, you know how it would have gone. It would have been an escalation. They would have put 3 people. We would have put 5. They put a small base. We do a bigger base. And the next thing you know, the magazines run a headline, has the Cold War reached the moon? That's how it should have gone. I have never seen in the history of any competition where the first guy reaches the finish line and then the other people just walk off the course. It's like, oh, he won. Might as well just stop. Never ever. And in fact, the Russian space program after Apollo just disappeared. And I know exactly why. Sorry, I know I'm getting worked up here, but I got to get this point across. Here's the reason why. The reason is because you can't have, this is straight up Hollywood studio stuff, which is 2 studios cannot work on the exact same project without continuity issues. Meaning even studios working on their own projects, right? Which is why they're so terrified of like doing reshoots, because if the moviemistakes.com, right? How many movie things? I mean, for God's sakes, the first Lord of the Rings, there was a car driving through the Shire that somebody missed, right? If a coffee cup moves from one side of the room to the other and somebody catches it, you're going to hear about it. So if you have studios, one in the Soviet Union, one in Moscow, and one in an Air Force base somewhere in the United States, working on the same project, the chances of them being completely match up is impossible. Absolutely impossible. It's like, because somebody's going to watch, like, hey, why is the Russian moon so brown? Or why is their gravity look different? Or I mean, it was just a nightmare. No one was, which is why, by the way, why there were no stars. People say, oh, it's an exposure setting. No stars anywhere in the moon. No, that's not why. It's because the stars have to be in the right place. Remember, stars move, right? So, and it's all time stamped. So all of a sudden, if the belt of Orion is not in the right place, some nerd is going to say, hey, that belt of Orion should be completely on the other side. And if that happens more than once, it's impossible. You can't do it. So, sorry. Long answer to space tourism. Never, ever, 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 ever. Wait for it. Ever going to happen, because they can't. It's something you can't fake. Hell, they don't even like faking pictures of the Earth. Look this up. The first blue marble shot of the Earth was the famous 1972 blue marble shot. You know when the second shot was taken? Summer of 2015. 43 years, no one took a second shot, and we only knew this because Obama actually talked about it, and Scott Kelly wrote the press release, and Obama's like, the second blue marble shot of the world. Really, really great. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? 4 decades? No one took a full disc shot of the Earth? No one did, apparently. And no one figured it out either. They don't even like doing that. So no, they're not going to fake space tourism. They don't even want to fake putting a person on the moon. They're just kick that can down the road. Never, ever, ever going to happen. You can't get to the moon. Americans didn't go to the moon. It's all just a wonderful, all the world's a stage. I think Shakespeare said that.
Okay, last question. Do you think climate change is a hoax?
That's a good question to end on. No, I think it's real. For several, and it's weird. I get that question probably. I used to get it only like 1 in 10, but now I get it like 1 in 5. Do I think it's real? Climate change? Yes. It makes a whole bunch more sense. Do I think the weather's changing? Yeah. I mean, come on. I dealt with, we shatter. I'm up in Seattle. We shattered records, and most of them are hot. And I know there's some people saying that, oh, it's cyclical and we have many ice ages and many this, many that. It's like, oh yeah, okay, fine, but it's getting really, really hot. And I know they don't like using the term global warming because that kind of freaks people out. That's been in sci-fi movies for years. It makes more sense in a flat model, though, because if you're in a building, then if you introduce, because remember, a car is just a furnace. It's just a furnace on wheels. That's all. I mean, you can modify, and people have done it. You can take a car engine and heat a whole house with it because you're just burning fuel, a lot of it. So if you get 1 billion furnaces at any given time running all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the world, well, that's going to affect something, isn't it? I mean, if you're in a car that has air conditioning and somebody brings in a propane lantern or a candle, right? How many candles can you put in your car before your air conditioning system has to try to compensate and do weird things? And then all of a sudden you have weird weather in different places. In fact, doesn't the term greenhouse gas mean a little bit more if it's an actual greenhouse? That's the other thing. It's like, when heat rises, it goes to the edge of space. Where's it going? Right? Shouldn't it just escape? I know people say, oh, no, fluorocarbons stay at a certain altitude. It's like, since when? Why? Remember, again, it goes circle back to the law of thermodynamics. Pressure cannot exist next to no pressure without some sort of barrier. I don't care if a fluorocarbon's sitting up there or not. The vacuum's going to suck it all up. So, yes, I absolutely believe in climate change. Do I think it's man-made? Yeah, not only do I think there's a furnace issue, but I think that some of your more advanced military systems have also figured out a way to alter weather, to actually control it electromagnetically. And which is, hey, it's a great idea. From a military standpoint, you'd love to make weather into a weapon because you can't get blamed for it. It's like you just dump all sorts of stuff. Let's just do 1,000 lightning strikes over there. And what are you going to do? It's like there's no flag attached to a lightning strike. But at the same time, if you do that, I would think the system would have to compensate in other ways. Meaning there would be repercussions to, if you pull energy out from one area, it's going to affect some other area, inadvertently. And I don't think it's a perfect science, but again, I don't blame them. What I would do. So there you go. Does that help?